Hello and welcome to the David Icke Connector Videocast. Well, not so long ago, I was considered a nutter. Go back to the 1990s, I was considered completely insane. Some people still think that, who haven't looked at what I've said against what has happened since. But the view of me is changing simply because of that. That a vast range of things that I've been saying over the last 30 years were the plan for the world are happening or have happened. And I'm going to go through just a few of them today, and it is just a few. Not to say, look at me and I was right, but for this reason. If I knew what the plan was for the world 30, 20, 10 years ago, then it's not random, is it? It's not happening just as random accident. How can you predict random accidents? They just happen. Agendas don't. They play out. And if you can uncover what they are long in advance, then you can appear to predict the future. But what you've done is predicted the agenda, which, unless there is an intervention to stop it, will play out and you will appear to predict the future. And this whole process of uncovering what the agenda is and then it happening is what's known in the mainstream media as a conspiracy theory. Because there are no conspiracies, you see. Two or more people have never conspired to bring about a desired end, which is what basically the definition of conspiracy is. It's never happened. So if you talk about it, well, you're crazy and you're just a conspiracy theorist, which, as I keep emphasizing, is a term that came into widespread use thanks to the CIA in the 1960s, who encouraged media organizations to use that term to discredit people who were questioning the official, brackets, ludicrous story of the Kennedy assassination. And you see, one thing that they never ask when people like me say this is the plan is, well, is it true? What's your evidence? They never ask that. Oh, it's a conspiracy theory. And so you get dismissed by the mainstream. And at the same time, the mainstream continually promote conspiracy theories, like the Russian conspiracy theory, like the 9/11 conspiracy theory, because that's all it is. Oh no, they're not conspiracy theories. How do you know? Because the authorities told us. And that's basically the foundation of mainstream journalism, which is not investigating what's happened or what is planned to happen, but to repeat what the authorities say has happened or is planned to happen or why it's happening. And this is why we are now having this extraordinary and ever-increasing level of censorship of those that challenge the narrative, because the narrative does not want to be challenged. The mainstream media won't challenge the narrative, but some of us do, and they have to be silenced. So here's just a few of the things that I've been saying was the plan over the years, which clearly are now unfolding. And I emphasize it's only a few that I've described in detail in the books. First of all, I've been talking for so long about the fact that there is a plan for a third world war between the West and if you like, a coalition of China, Russia, Iran, and whatever other allies support them. Clearly, as we look at events, not just today in relation to Iran, but to the demonization of Russia year after year, you can see that unfolding. And now, of course, we're getting the increasing demonization of China, all predicted in my books. And then there's the phenomenal now destruction of freedom of speech and freedom of expression and freedom of opinion. The Orwellian state, which is sweeping across the world. This is something else that was in my books decades ago, that this was coming. Then you have the whole human-caused climate change hoax, which I said was planned to create an excuse for the transformation of human society through the centralization of power to be justified by we must centralize power to save the world. We must impose on the fine detail of your lives to save the world. And that is exactly now what is being suggested and proposed by United Nations literal agendas called Agenda 21 and Agenda 2030. It's what's being proposed by the Green New Deal coming out of the Democratic Party in America. It's what's being proposed by this group Extinction Rebellion that shut the streets of London recently in protests about human-caused climate change that's not actually happening. And so, again, so long ago, you say, this is the plan. Human-caused climate change is a hoax to justify this. And now, just by coincidence, nothing to worry about. That's exactly what they're proposing, justified by selling the lie of human-caused climate change. Then there's the whole agenda that I talked about long ago of mass immigration into countries which are designed, or which is designed, to transform those countries and to create a situation of divide and rule, which is an essential in any situation where the few wish to control the many. They have to divide and rule the many. And that, there are other reasons for it too, but that is the reason that it's happening. It's happening in Europe and it's happening in the United States. And, it's no good saying, oh, that's racist. No, it's not. It's true. And I was saying that this was the plan before it actually started to unfold. Why? Because it's an agenda. And if you uncover it, you can predict the future. And the incoming migrants on the scale that's happening, and the indigenous population, including the previous migrant population, are both being manipulated by the same force. And they want us fighting each other because that's the whole idea, divide and rule. Then there's the cashless society. I was talking about that, writing about that in the books way back in the 1990s. The cashless society is designed to take away the ability to pay for anything by cash and only have, in the end, a single electronic global currency. And the only way that you can pay for anything is through that digital electronic currency, if you like. Which means that when you go into a shop now and the computer system won't accept your card, your electronic money, you can still pay cash. But when cash is gone, there is no alternative to buy anything except barter. And I'll tell you what the plan is about barter. They want to make it illegal on the grounds that they can't tax it. So the cashless society, this is why bank branches are closing. This is why ATMs are being taken out. This is why more and more payment systems demand cashless payment. It's because not anything to do with money in and of itself. It's to do with control. Because when you control a cashless, in the end, one world currency, and there's no alternative to it, then you control if people purchase, what people purchase, if people can eat, if people can't eat. And that's the idea. It's all about control. And in terms of current events, in relation to Iran, when Trump won the election in 2016, I put a meme on the internet which said that key word of the Trump administration would be Iran. And through Iran, it would be Russia and China. And that's exactly what's happened. Why? Because I'm a prophet? No. Because I've been working for 30 years full time uncovering this crap. This, yes, conspiracy to enslave humanity in a centralized global Orwellian state. And when you do that, then you can uncover this agenda, and thus you can predict the future, which is simply the agenda playing out. So now we have this targeting of Iran, which is so predictable. And you know, you can go back to September 2000 and an organization called the Project for the New American Century, which was created by co-founders Robert Kagan and William Crystal, who are both Israel agents. And you look at the people that were members of it, Dick Cheney and Donald Rumsfeld, Paul Wolfowitz, and John Bolton. John Bolton, who is now the National Security Advisor to Trump, who's pushing this agenda against Iran, wanting conflict with Iran, pushing the agenda against North Korea, pushing the agenda against Venezuela, etc., etc. The man's never seen a country he didn't want to bomb, unless he was in it. Because he's never seen a bullet fired in anger. Lets other people do that. Because the man's a coward, as well as a crook and a con man, and a psychopath. So you go back to the Project for the New American Century in September 2000, they produced a document in which they called for a regime change in a list of countries. What were those countries? Iraq, Libya, Syria, Iran, North Korea, leading to regime change in China. And all these countries, just by accident, just a coincidence, nothing to worry about, are the ones that's been targeted ever since. And when I talked about this in relation to Iran and North Korea, people then said to me, see, you were wrong about Iran because they've got a deal now with Iran, a nuclear deal, it's all settled down. And I said to them, just wait. And they said, oh, no, Trump's talking to North Korea now. You were wrong about that. It's all going to be sorted. And I said, just wait. And now, of course, the Iran deal has been dropped by Trump because he just answers to whatever Israel wants. And his main funder, Sheldon Adelson, another Israeli fanatic, wants. And of course, it's all going pear-shaped with North Korea, because there is an agenda, and if anyone tries to get in the way, then it is blocked so the agenda can unfold. And we're having now all these sanctions being used as a weapon of war against all these target countries, not least China at the moment. And this is a prelude. They want, not saying they'll achieve it, but what they want is conflict, literal conflict with those countries. And Syria is a great example. The Project the New American Century, which is basically an Israel organization, wanted regime change in Syria, and so regime change was attempted in Syria, and with the intervention of Russia, that was stopped. But they're not giving up, and so they keep trying to justify outright war with the Assad government and the people of Syria on the basis of Assad is using chemical weapons against his own people, which is a technique that I've been describing for 30 years nearly as what I call problem reaction solution, or in this case no problem reaction solution, where you create a problem or the illusion of one, and you then that's the illusion of the problem. You then want the reaction from the people. Oh, this can't go on, do something. And then you offer the solution to the problem you've covertly created, which in this case is Assad has used chemical weapons against his own people. We must go in and remove Assad. Now, in the last few days, a leaked document from the global watchdog on chemical weapons, which is actually controlled by the West. A leaked document has confirmed that one of these key chemical weapons attacks on his own people by Assad, which led to Trump unleashing missile attacks on Syrian targets, was actually not Assad at all. Well, some of us said so at the time, because they found in this leaked document that's come out that the chemical weapons were not dropped from the sky by Assad aircraft, as claimed, but actually were put there from the ground. And that is highly significant because that whole area where it happened was not controlled by Assad, but controlled by the Western-backed, armed and funded rebels. And the United States reaction to that this week has been to make another claim of Assad targeting his own people with chemical weapons. So it's a mass of deceit and lies which are designed for one thing: to manipulate this agenda I've been exposing for 30 years into reality. And the elephant sitting there on the sofa all along is the far right regime in Israel. Who benefits from all this stuff in the Middle East, using American troops and British troops and other European country troops? Israel. Because what's playing out is the agenda laid out in September 2000 by the Israeli agency, because that's what it was, the project for the new American century. And when Trump came to power, well, all their dreams came true in one go, because Trump is owned by Israel. His biggest funder is the media owner and casino magnate Sheldon Adelson. His senior advisor is Jared Kushner, his son-in-law, who is a lifelong friend of Benjamin Netanyahu. Then you have two former Trump employees, Jason Greenblatt and David Friedman, who used to work with the Trump organization. David Friedman is now American ambassador to Israel. Jason Greenblatt is now his international negotiator, including negotiating on Israel-Palestine. And when the Israeli far-right government, in cohorts with Sheldon Adelson, said to Trump, scrap the Iran deal, which has kicked off all that's happening now, Trump, yes sir. And you'll move the American embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. Yes, sir. And you'll let us put more and more Jewish-only settlements, it's not racist or anything, in the occupied West Bank. You won't push us back in any way. Yes, sir. Oh, and just to sum it up, you'll do everything we tell you, Mr. Trump, right? Yes, sir. And that's what we are looking at in front of our eyes. And that's why you've seen this ramping up of what I call the anti-Semitism industry and the protection racket. Because that's what all this is about. Where any criticism of the far-right regime in Israel, or anyone who just happens to be Jewish, I don't care what they are, I care what they're doing, is anti-Semitic, and you must be silenced. This is why I was banned from Australia. That's why even showing of the film that's coming out shortly, Renegade, about my life and work, was banned from being shown by 2 organizations. It's because the truth is so obvious that it has to be silenced with ever greater extremes of censorship. And so this protection racket is not about protecting Jewish people from discrimination. It's about protecting the far-right government in Israel from being exposed for what it's doing. And people like Sheldon Adelson and George Soros being exposed for what they're doing. But there are other parts of this whole agenda too. Like I say, there's destruction of freedom of speech. And we're seeing another in-your-face example of that with Julian Assange. He's being used now as an example, a warning to everyone else. This is what happens if you take us on. And we now have a situation where Assange is being vilified, and they wanted to completely destroy him for the crime, through WikiLeaks, of revealing information that the public absolutely has a right to see, so it can understand the nature of the force, the psychopathic force that is controlling the lives of billions of people. But no, you must destroy those that reveal the truth, because the truth is the last thing that this psychopathic cabal that I've been uncovering for 30 years wants people to know. And it's also highly relevant to current events that I've been warning again for so long about the end game in all this, which is to connect the human brain to artificial intelligence, so artificial intelligence becomes the human mind. It becomes human perception, becomes human emotion. It becomes everything we think. That's the idea. And it's being constructed through something I call the smart grid. That's why almost everything you see these days is called smart, because it's all connected. It's part of one grid of human control, ultimately directly to the human brain. And an absolute bottom line foundation must have to make this grid work is communicative power of at least 5G. And that is why 5G, which is cumulatively lethal, not just physically but psychologically, is being rolled out as the telecommunication cabal, part of the bigger cabal, have admitted, without any official studies, tests to see its effect on human beings. But those scientists that have done the research themselves have said it will be potentially catastrophic. So, you see, when you put these elements together, because people say, oh, you see conspiracies everywhere. Well, actually, on the definition of two or more people conspiring to bring about a desired end, conspiracies are everywhere. But I'm not talking about conspiracies everywhere. I'm talking about one conspiracy that has multiple faces. And when you do the research, you find that the war agenda, the mass migration agenda, the cashless society agenda, the destruction of freedom of speech agenda, the surveillance agenda, is all ultimately controlled, including the smart grid 5G agenda. If you go deep enough in the rabbit hole, you find the same source for all of it. Now, if we had mainstream media that was peopled by something called a journalist, then this could have been uncovered a long time ago. But we don't have journalists, we have repeaters. We have so-called journalists who basically cheer when people like Assange are vilified and targeted for the crime of doing what those journalists should have done themselves. And because of that, those that are operating outside of the mainstream, people like me, have to do what journalists should be doing, but either are too ignorant or too terrified to do. And that's why people like me now are being more and more targeted to be silenced, because there's nothing more powerful than information that makes sense of the world and demolishes the official narrative of what we're supposed to believe. And something else that I put on the internet within an hour of the Brexit referendum, when majority of people who voted to come out of the European Union, was that this was just the start, because the political class weren't going to go quietly and allow Brexit just to happen. And of course, that's what we've seen. Again, it wasn't prophecy. You only have to look at every time a referendum has gone against the EU, they have sought to overturn it, often to have another referendum. And that's what this push for a second referendum is all about, just to overturn the result of the first, which was the result they didn't want. The idea of the EU, because this whole cabal is about centralizing power until it's eventually on a global level, dictating to every community from a central point. The last thing they want is for countries to leave the EU. They want to absorb more and more, so that more and more can be controlled by unelected bureaucrats in Brussels, who are, in the end, just operatives for this cabal, this web that I'm talking about. So they were never going to let Brexit happen just like that. They were going to do everything they could to stop it. So now we have people like the Liberal Democrats in this country and others in the political class who are saying we must have a people's vote. Well, we've just had a people's vote and they voted to come out. Oh, but that was the wrong people's vote. We want another people's vote, so they will vote the way we want. It's called democracy, by the way. Because there's an agenda. And most of the people, like the Liberal Democrat leader, Vince Cable, he will be clueless about the fact that there is an agenda. Just another pawn in a game he doesn't even know is being played, just like most of the political class. But what Brexit has done, or the efforts to thwart it, have shown people very clearly that government is not about serving people. It's about dictating to people. It's about imposing the will of the political class. Just most of them, not all of them, but most of them, just pawns in a game run by a cabal they don't even know about. That actually the world is not being run for people and the best interests of people. That's why trillions are spent on wars in the Middle East, while the number of homeless in America and elsewhere just goes on increasing. It's not about people. It's about a few imposing their will on everyone else. And maybe, yes, of course, at one time, I was the national nutter. But I said years ago, there's going to come a point where this conspiracy has to break the surface. Or you can manipulate below the surface, below the radar, for so long. But eventually, if you want to transform society in the way that you want, this centralized Orwellian fascist state, then you have to break the surface, because things have to change to produce the society you want, and we're there. We're at that point where it's had to break the surface where people can see it. And now suddenly, the nutter is not so crazy. The next question comes. As more and more people realize the game, are we going to stand on the other side of the street and observe it and complain about it? Or are we going to, en masse, stop fighting among ourselves on the grounds of race and religion and income bracket and politics? And are we going to come together and in unity cease to cooperate with our own enslavement. Because if we do, the game is over. If we don't, the game will reach its nightmare conclusion. Quite a choice, isn't it? Hard, isn't it? Are we going to just accept what is being imposed upon us? Or are we going to say, no more? The choice we make is the difference between tyranny beyond anything Orwell even envisaged, and the freedom that is waiting for that decision to be made. We're not having it anymore. We're not being imposed upon anymore. Game up. Game over. And we better make that choice quick, because we don't have forever to make it. In fact, things are moving quicker and quicker towards the end that's been manipulated for so long. But if enough people stop cooperating, the game must end, because it is dependent on our acquiescence with our own enslavement.